All right. Yeah. Sorry. Just been making multiple attempts, and I'm laughing at my own screw ups, essentially my own mistakes. Anyway, this video, gonna be talking about energy generation methods for when you build a spaceship. Because there are various options that you could choose from. Um, they have different pros and cons. Solar power is right out. Not doing that one. Wind power too. What winds in space are you going to use? Solar power doesn't work because in a previous video I talked about dark space. That's basically what my alternative to interstellar space. It's not basically, that is exactly my alternative to interstellar space. But it's dark space because it's dark. There's no dominant source of starlight. So a solar panel, yeah, not going to help. Hydroelectric power. There are no rivers in space. That's power. And actually, I'm going to bring that up shortly as well. Fossil fuels. Okay, technically you could take a very large tank of gasoline with you. I don't like the idea. I mean, it's very bulky. You have to worry about how you're storing it, how you move it. I don't like that idea. But technically it is possible. Also, I'm not even sure if the energy density you could produce from that would possibly be enough. Then there's nuclear fission. Nuclear fission, that could work. Very high energy density, all things considered, very high. And it does just sit there and just work. And it's also, I mean, we already have nuclear reactors in aircraft carriers, in submarines. There was even one more commercial, I think it was a commercial ship that was going to be used for trade, essentially. Just big ass cargo ship. Did not succeed though. What did not prove very profitable because it was as I recall, it was expensive, and also people were leery of nuclear fission in I think that was in the 50s. Although we do have nuclear powered icebreakers, those do exist, and those make sense. Those make a lot of sense because you need those things to go out for very long periods of time in the Arctic. That is where these specifically were for. I don't remember who manufactured them, but it was one of the Baltic states up there. So I mean, it makes sense that they would have this concern, and they made them nuclear powered because they could go out for very long periods of time, very stable, very reliable. You don't need to worry about them coming in to get new fuel. That it'll just keep going and going and going and going. And then there's nuclear fusion, which is very powerful. I mean, it can be much more powerful than nuclear fission, and it just uses hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium. Hydrogen and its three isotopes, technically. There are three isotopes, because hydrogen itself is the first primary isotope. Then there's deuterium and tritium, which those are fairly common as well. They're the smallest element on the periodic table. They also like to bind together into molecules. There's a few elements that are like that, where they prefer to be in pairs than just off alone. Hydrogen is one of those, so in theory, yeah, you could definitely store a lot of that fairly conveniently in a spaceship. Yeah, so that seems like a good plan now, doesn't it? Yeah, no. If you watch the presentation, you already know this. If not, yeah, nuclear fusion. I was starting to say fission, trying to correct myself. Yay, speech impediment and not always being smart. Nuclear fusion is really bad for a spaceship because it's a stimulated event. You have to ignite it. That is the goal, to achieve nuclear fusion ignition. In one very qualified way, we have achieved that, which is ignition is when you have put more energy. You have gotten more energy out of the nuclear fusion event than you put in. Technically, that's been achieved once, but there's a major qualification because it was something like we pumped 2 million watts of power onto the fuel and got 3 million out. So a profit of 1 million, except there was something like 10 million. No, I think it was actually 100 million watts that we used to power the lasers that did this. And then the lasers only dumped that 2 million out. So it was at the socket, very poor efficiency. Ignition was not achieved. But from the lasers on, technically we did. Yeah. But still, that's a major problem on a spaceship because, as I said, we're in dark space. Where's that external source of power? Like, if you drop below, let's use that, and I might have those values wrong for what was actually achieved, but let's just say it is 2 million that you need to ignite to get 3 million out. What happens if you drop below 2 million watts? You die. No, seriously, that would be the answer. You would die because you couldn't possibly reignite the fuel anymore. You whatever energy you have is it. You're just gonna cool and die in space. That's not so good. Nuclear fission, however, is a spontaneous event. If you just have hunky uranium sitting there, it's just going to keep giving off energy. As long as it's there. Well, not quite as long. If I remember correctly, I want to say it's like 20 years that a lot of the nuclear power plants that are in ships, submarines, and such, I think those last about 20 years. And now, true, you probably want more power for a spaceship than what those are outputting. Although, in some ways, a submarine is not that different from a spaceship in that it has to be a completely sealed environment and, work for a large number of people on there. Well, moderately large. I don't know how large those crews are, but I would think definitely dozens, which is not unreasonable for a spaceship either. So, maybe, okay, you got one there. Maybe, try to have 2 or 3. It doesn't seem unreasonable, or you make one really big. So that doesn't seem unreasonable. And you have that stability that, maybe 20 years of power that you can reliably get out of them. So after 15 years, you want to go in and change it. That way, even if it's like, oh yeah, the spaceport is really busy, we can't get you right away. All right, well, we got 5 years, so, just put us on schedule as soon as you can. When will that be? Oh, in a month. Oh yeah, we're fine. I mean, why not? Why couldn't it work that way? But yeah, so fission really is a better system, at least for a primary power, for a spaceship. Now, I could see some spaceships, ones that are very big, huge, that could handle both. You could have both the fission there as a primary power, but then fusion when you need it. And these, I think you would basically be limited just to warships, to be honest. Which technically, in my Catherine verse, there is reference to at least one war. Because the main character, Roman, in a letter from Catherine, actually served in a war. He is a veteran. And I think in I Call My Ship Catherine as well, there's also a reference to them that the kind of ship Catherine is, the specific class of ship is actually one that's banned from being used in war, mainly because it is just designed so well that it could be used itself as a very damaging weapon. It's like, yeah, we don't want to do that. That's overkill. Who knows if I'll keep that? Maybe I'll change that in the future. I don't know. I'll have to look through and think on some more. But anyway. You could have for a warship, because you expect that to be very powerful, very large, and if you're not using nuclear fusion all the time, well, then you have the fission backbone to power it, and also some other things that I just realized I forgot to mention are not so big an issue with nuclear fusion, which is nuclear fusion, it dumps a lot of energy very rapidly and in singular events. It's like you ignite it, and it's, well, here, cover your ears. No, I won't do it. But it would be kind of like that, where, like nuclear fission, let's just say it's at the level of my voice for sound. But nuclear fusion, I'm constantly talking. Nuclear fusion, though, would be like a single clap. Very loud, very intense, but very brief. Because you trigger it, and it goes poof, releasing a lot of energy, a lot of heat that you need to somehow absorb and do something with. Technically, you need to worry about that with with fission as well, which for nuclear fission reactors, we use water, typically. For nuclear fusion, what they're trying to do with the, at least ITER facility that they're building in France, that's a tokamak design, if you want to look that up. That, I believe, they also intend to use water as the medium to absorb the heat and then eventually convert to steam to produce energy from turbines. Electricity via turbines. In theory, you could actually do that on a spaceship as well, but it still is. With a nuclear fusion device, that's putting out so much energy, there's going to be some you might not be using. What do you do? Well, you need to vent it somehow. If you are converting it to electricity, you don't have a ground you can dump it into, so that's a problem. And if you're not converting into electricity, you need to get rid of the heat. Where do you dump that? Because we have rivers on Earth. You don't have those in space. Yeah, that's kind of why it's like you wouldn't want this as a primary power source because you set off powerful explosions inside your ship constantly when using it, and any overage on the energy you need to be able to deal with, and that might not always be feasible. But a warship makes sense. You're in a battle, turn that on, you're powering the weapons. So it's much more I lost the word. You're using it for short periods of time, though. It was what I was trying to get to. So it's not so big an issue. And it's also, maybe if you have a robust energy storage system there, you do that so you can use the weapons for an extended period of time before you need to recharge them via that. I could see something like that as well. So, but it still is not ideal on a spaceship. Technically, a space station, though, you could have large enough, power usage could be regular enough that you could have nuclear fusion there, and I do describe that. The space station in A Letter from Catherine, it does have nuclear fusion there, but it does also have nuclear fission. And in fact, these are in two different parts of the station. There's specific reasons for that. For fusion, it's like just over in the main maintenance area where you'd also have the atmosphere reprocessing and all that. Fission is at the docks. Now, I may end up doing a video talking about all the stuff with the space station design, and there's a few reasons why I have the nuclear fission there, but one of them that I'll share now is just that the docks, if there's an emergency, that's where you're going. That is how you evacuate. So it makes sense that you have the most reliable energy source there, so that if something goes wrong, you know the docks have power. And also I do describe, as I recall, they're also one of the first places you actually put in place for a space station, because you need to be able to dock there to do various things. So it makes sense those would be first. So first power there, and as I was just saying, nuclear fusion doesn't work for a primary power source. So the first power source makes sense. It makes sense for the first power source to be the primary one, which would be fission. So it makes sense to be at the docks. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I can really mention about this. Yeah, that's right. One of the prior attempts in this video I remembered about, how do you refuel? Well, with nuclear fission, yeah, you got about 20 years on those reactors. So it's like, okay, we don't need to worry about changing that out very often. Nuclear fusion, though, if you run out of fuel, technically, there's hydrogen throughout the universe. It's not that hard to find. Like some of the Eagle Nebula here is going to be fusion, is going to be hydrogen. So in theory, you could collect it there. Yeah. But it still is great. We got all the fuel. Can we ignite it? If you can't, then what's the point? Whereas uranium would be much harder to find. But it is, again, as I said, you got like 20 years. You make sure you just change it out in time. It's not an issue then. But it does mean you would have to come back home, as it were, to have that done. Anything else I can really mention with that? Because I'm just looking through the notes I have. Yeah, I guess there's also that point that I could make. I mean, I kind of already made it. And I just realized I have that missed a word. But just, I mentioned how for nuclear fusion, it would make sense for very large ships and warships. Well, how do you power the small ships? Again, this is where nuclear fission makes more sense, because you can't have that at a very small scale. There's actually been a number of space missions that are nuclear powered. Now, true, that's just like a small piece of uranium or plutonium, something like that there, and then thermoelectric devices set up around it, so the energy is absorbed as heat and converted into electricity, because something like the Cassini space mission, that's actually one of them that had nuclear. It was nuclear powered, had nuclear fission in there, which, by the way, You can't really compete with Hubble as far as the beauty of its images, but Cassini also did produce some beautiful stuff with Saturn. That's uh, where it was. It was orbiting Saturn for quite a long time. And oh man, even as it was dying, because it had finally like run out of being able to be useful, so they decided to have it plunge into Saturn because tearing through the atmosphere there, it would definitely be destroyed. They didn't want it to land on a moon or something like that and be somehow disruptive there. They were actually surprised, though, for how long it was still able to broadcast while descending into the outer layers of Saturn. It's really neat. But anyway, where's I going? Oh yeah, just the small size. You have that. You have obviously the large 100 megawatt level. That's the order of magnitude for nuclear power plants that we know. There's also work done on smaller that would be like single megawatt level for nuclear power plants of that size, and there are actually very reasonable reasons for that. Sorry, I'm better at writing than I am at talking, I promise. But the idea there is to have something that you might be able to fit one or two of them in the size of a container, of a shipping container. And you could just have these, and they would be kind of similar to what you'd find on a submarine or aircraft carrier, where they're just very stable, and you could like just stick them in the ground somewhere, have it hooked up to the power grid, and that can power a community. And it would only be about a megawatt, but it is. There were reasons to build such large, the multi-hundred megawatt power plants. There are reasons to do that, but there are also reasons for these. They can be much cheaper to build. They're technically solid state. I mean, it's like you build them, and then when they die, they die. That's it. You don't worry about changing them out. You don't need personnel working there constantly attending them. They're much cheaper. They were also, some designs are modular, so you could put a bunch of them together. So a suburban community might only need one, an urban community might need several. Well, they can all be built together to power that one community. So it is, you definitely have options there. Even today, you have designs today that would work for fission power of spaceships at various sizes. But it is also for, like, anyone thinking, well, why aren't we doing that with, like, space stations or spaceships today? It's like, well, we would be in, I guess, light space since there's dark space. The sun is there and can provide ample amounts of energy. So why not just go with that? That, in some cases, can be preferable. Now, something like Cassini or the Voyager probes, those would also be nuclear powered. Cassini was at Saturn. That's really far away. So for what you wanted to do, it makes sense use something that's more reliable on site as opposed to having to rely on. There we go. What is that? I think that's the mic cable. That's crossing my hand right there. Rather than relying on the sun, that would be so far away that it would probably be too dim to be useful for what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, it's always a question of, okay, what is the purpose of the craft? Where's it going to be most of the time? And then, okay, well, what's the most reasonable power source to use in this situation? I just feel that for the majority of spaceships, if they are exploring dark space, it would be nuclear fission. For ships that constantly go between regular points, so let's say from this star to... Can I get my hand far enough over for it, or does the chemical pop? Hey, I'm right at the edge to that star. I have no idea what those stars are or how far apart they are, but let's say that you have a reason to go back and forth between those two. Well, you're either going between planets there or space stations there, both of which would have some capacity for power, for their own power, and so would be able to power the ship. So energy storage would make sense there. It's only like, hey, we're going from this star to somewhere over there, because notice there's far fewer stars, and you just want to explore that. All right, how long are you gonna be gone? I don't know. All right, where are you gonna stop so you can refill your tank? I don't know. All right, I guess you want to use something like nuclear fission there instead of just energy storage, which that will be a separate video that I'll probably get to tomorrow. We'll see. But yeah, it is stop and think about not just what's cool, because science fiction, it can be very tempting and just be cool. Just be like, we can make big, fancy ships, can't we? Isn't that fun? Yeah, but it's also, to me, I think a lot of fun to be like, okay, no. How would we actually do this? How could it actually exist and have this work? And also, can we do it with stuff that already exists? Like, can we get these things almost be off the shelf? Intriguing idea, isn't it? I mean, it is already. With dark space, I mentioned you can figure out whether or not you're in dark space or not with a light sensor and optics that exist today. And it's like now with nuclear fission, I mean, especially if you're using one of those modular nuclear fission reactors I was talking about, because those, I don't think you were running water in there. Well, water coming in and then going out, so that's contained. I don't know if any of those have been built. At least I'm certain they haven't been built for like commercial production, so there's that. Am I going to end this series realizing that we could actually build one of these things? That'd be kind of neat for Let's Build a Spaceship playlist one did. Too bad I'm not an engineer. Because who knows, maybe I could actually make that. Because then it's like, hey, I got these plans, why aren't we doing it? Actually, I can tell you one reason why. It'd be very difficult to get into orbit. Those things are heavy. And where would you go with it? And how would you get it moving? And can't think of any others off the top of my head. Not really. There are reasons we're not doing this. Technical reasons. There's also other reasons. But hey, I should probably stop this video now, don't you think? Anyway, I'm having fun. I like this. That's, I think, part of the reason why I like rambling is because it's like, I'm just having fun. I want to share this. I want to tell everyone about this. All right. So yeah, I'll see you again. See you next time. Probably for energy storage, which is a related topic, but can be a little different. All right. See you then.